me ask you a question about that, because what it seems to me, and please, correct my layman's understanding if this is not accurate, but I thought it was interesting how you said that willing isn't the right word. It seems to me like there's a great ambivalence, at least in the United States, and almost this kind of sense of like inevitability. It's like if you want to use the app or whatever, it's going to have this terms and conditions things that comes up. And it's sort of like, well, why even read it? Or if you do click it, the thing, why even read? It's not, it's almost like it's a pretense of a negotiation or contract, but in reality, it's more like an ultimatum. So
Right.
if you want to use this, you have to agree to this. And
Exactly.
and the idea of a regulatory agency that could somehow intervene in that process, and I don't know that, I mean, it seems to me like perhaps, and maybe this is wrong, but in the US, at least in many corridors or circles, the thought would be that that's just not really something that could happen, that we could have, like, there's this sense of technology is kind of wild, wild west, and whatever regulatory intervention you attempted to do, it would somehow be circumvented. And there's just this kind of sense, so ambivalence and this kind of sense of almost like futility, like, well, if you want to use their stuff, they're going to be able to have an AI scan through your pictures or do whatever they're doing. And there's kind of powerful corporations that, so do you think that perception is more or less accurate? And then
I think that's real. And there's been research showing that we have this increased level of privacy apathy is how researchers are actually talking about it. That again, this sense of inevitableness. I have so many devices, so many services, I just can't manage it all. And people just throw up their hands and just say, whatever, that's definitely out there. Folks have also described it as privacy fatigue. There are only so many OKs I can click on websites, for the notice that there's a tracking cookie, and you just click through. I just want to read the news, or I just want to watch that video.
Right.
And that's a real problem. When it comes to, again, like to your point, if we've set up the whole kind of regulatory structure around notice and consent, which is how we've dealt with privacy for the last 50 years, that as long as you click OK, therefore anything goes, and that just doesn't work anymore. I mean, because we're tired of it, we don't read the 50 pages of a new terms of service. Other wrinkles in that is I may have clicked OK when I first set up my Instagram account in 2005, and now it's 15 years later, and who knows what changed, but I still agreed to those original terms.
Right.
And so there's challenges there. Now, this is hard though, because one of the things, again, in Europe, they were trying to create an environment that respects people's decisions and wants to make sure people are really informed, which was why all of a sudden in the last couple of years, you probably noticed there are so many more pop-ups about cookies. Are you willing to tracking cookies on your computer?
Mm-hmm.
And there was,
I mean, in case there's a sort of non-expert or even someone who's not particularly, sufficient or proficient technologically, a cookie and what that's doing, maybe just
certainly. A web cookie was something that was developed early on in the web. That when you visit a website, a small piece of text gets placed on your computer saying you're at this website at this day and time, and a string of characters, we'll just say 16 random characters that identifies your web browser. So when the next time you visit that website, whether it's marquette.edu or amazon.com, they'll find that string on your computer and remember it was you. So this is how you can stay logged in on Amazon, or your shopping cart stays with items in it as you go around. And so it was meant to be to help sort of preserve, that status. Like, I've been here before, you should remember me because of this code. But that's been, it got kind of used or abused in ways to allow the tracking of website to website. And advertisers have been able to use that to track what you're doing from website to website. It's become a primary tool for data collection for targeted advertising.
Okay.
Now in Europe, again, they're a little more focused on autonomy and dignity, and they wanted to make sure users understood when these cookies were being placed and being accessed. So the latest European rules said websites have to pop up a notice anytime they want to use a cookie. Whereas previously Google just had it as part of their overall terms and conditions, but now it has to be an affirmative action that you click OK, yes, accept cookies. The problem was it happened on every single website you visited. So then you got fatigue again and people were just clicking it. And the EU actually just the other week has acknowledged that this isn't working. Like we need to find another way to get around this. A wrinkle in this whole process, and again, this is something where listeners that also are interested in the psychology of users and interface design, websites have started to trick people into accepting things. And they're called dark patterns is the term that's used. How do you set up a consent screen to make sure that the OK button is really big and bold and the no thanks is a faint little tiny button in the corner? Like those kinds of tricks to get to sort of nudge people into certain choices.
Right.
There's also been examples where even clicking the X to like close a window on a web page is actually the consent button. So you think you're closing it to make it go away, but you're saying yes by doing that. So it's these really interesting,
how is that not? I don't know. I mean, I'm not an attorney, but how is that not? If you did something like that in some sort of physical setting or something, and like if you went to Walmart and they said, hey, sign here if you don't want to pay for this, and you signed and they went, oh, gotcha, you just actually bought this, I mean, that would just be clearly, so is it just they can get away with it, so they do it?
It's harder to prove, and I think it's really, if we can get away with it 99% of the times, that's still 99 million people, in terms of the volume. I mean, you asked earlier a little bit about like the enforcement side, and that is one of the key differences here in the US versus other parts of the world. And the way I teach this to our students is the US has a very utilitarian approach to dealing with things like privacy and data protection and ethics. We see the benefits of letting companies collect data. Look at all the innovation that comes out of Silicon Valley and out of these companies. And we shouldn't stifle that innovation. This is like the American spirit of just gathering, information and creating something new. And if someone happens to get harmed, we'll go fix that one little harm. Which is also why, from a privacy perspective, we have very narrow sectoral privacy laws in the US. We have a privacy law about your library records. We have a privacy law about your health records. We have a privacy law about your video rental records. But we don't have a comprehensive privacy law because we want to keep the hands off and let companies develop and innovate, because that's going to be for the greater good. In Europe, in Canada, to some extent, it's again more of kind of a dignity approach, not utilitarian, but more, of respecting human dignity. We have a duty to respect individuals for what they are and give them the power to decide how their data could be used. So they have different sets of rules. They're much more focused on enforcement. They'll penalize a company if they're misusing data. And it's much more focused on giving users that autonomy. So it's two very different kind of philosophies when it comes down to sort of governing data